Today we're talking about the feminist book banned from the Bible, and that book is known as The Reality of the Rulers. It was discovered in a graveyard near the tombs of Egypt, and this was banned from the Bible. Now, this is an incredible book. I really can't wait to jump into it with you guys, because one of the main themes that I love about this is the heroic feminine energy throughout. Almost all of the main characters in this book are feminine, and we see them triumphing over oppressive patriarchal themes. So it's going to be really good. We're going to jump into it. We're going to see exactly what this has to do with, you know, this powerful feminine force that was completely jettisoned and lacking in what eventually became modern Christianity, where it had this sort of really negative patriarchal tone to it, in which women are placed subordinate to men, which is absolutely horrible. But let's take a look at the reality of the rulers, also known as the Hypostasis of the Archons. So I'm extremely excited. Really, this is an awesome topic for me, because I am extremely pro women empowerment, women's liberation, equal opportunity for all. So this is a really important topic for me. And today we're talking about the feminist book banned from the Bible. And here's the thing, Christianity today is extremely patriarchal. And to emphasize this, let me read a couple verses just real quick illustrating this fact, because most people don't realize how sexist mainstream Christianity is and is today. For many churches, women aren't allowed to teach and occupy a lower place than men. People don't really realize that that's still extremely prevalent in mainstream Christianity. And by the way, these verses come from the New Testament, not the Old Testament, because people love to say, hey, you're just reading from the Old Testament and that doesn't apply anymore, which is, that in itself is a thing I could talk about. But this comes from the New Testament. So let me just read this to you to emphasize. This is a verse from the Bible. It says, I want women to dress modestly with decency and propriety, and not adorning themselves with elaborate hairstyles or gold or pearls or expensive clothes, but with good deeds appropriate for women who profess to worship God. So we're really, trying to tell women how to dress, what they can and can't do. But going much further, a woman should learn in quietness and full submission. I do not permit a woman to teach or to assume authority over a man. She must be quiet, because Adam was formed first, then Eve. And Adam was not the one deceived. It was the woman who was deceived and became a sinner. But women will be saved through childbearing if they continue in faith, love, and holiness with propriety. Pretty bad, right? Not good at all. Here's another one. Wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands as you do to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church, his body, of which he is the Savior. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit to their husbands in everything. And again, people don't really realize this, but I have firsthand experience. I grew up in an extremely strict Christian household, and I remember members of my Christian family who were women going, man, I really struggle with the fact that I have to submit to my husband, but I pray to the Lord to give me the strength to be able to, terrible things like this. So this is very real, very happens. I have firsthand experience. This is out there and exists, and it's very, very negative. So the thing that I love about this book that was banned from the Bible by the church, called The Reality of the Rulers, the Hypostasis of the Archons, is about it. There's so much feminine empowerment in it, and it's amazing, because as we'll see in this book, Eve is given an incredibly, important place, even, superseding Adam. We learn about the secret daughter of Eve, called Norea, and in the Bible you don't even learn the names of the daughters of Adam and Eve. They give the names of the son, Cain, Abel, Seth, etc. But they were just like, oh, they had daughters. But no, in this book we hear about the secret daughter of Eve named Norea, and Norea becomes a huge empowering figure, the main character of this story. And as we're going to see, it sort of follows Norea's journey as conquering the forces of darkness. So Norea is this, even represented by fire, right? Norea is represented as being associated with fire. She, when Noah rejects Norea, she blows and burns down the ark. She ends up conquering the forces of darkness and actually defeating God himself. And the reason why it's called the reality of the rulers is because another very powerful luminary called Elalith is telling Norea about the rulers. And the rulers turn out to be, in the Bible, what are described as angels, but in this book are actually demons, evil demonic forces. And these demons and God actually attempt to rape Eve and rape Norea. And it's just a fantastic book because you have all these powerful feminine, the female characters really take the lead. We have Eve, Elalith, Norea. These are all the heroes of the story. And you can really see it. And it's important to say, beings like non-corporeal beings like Elalith, and even the evil, demonic archons, rulers, and, God, they're all described as being androgynous. Most of them are. But if you look at them, there's still a clear dichotomy, even though, the non-corporeal figures on the side of light are androgynous. They have very feminine qualities. And the so-called androgynous on the forces of darkness are technically androgynous, but they have very masculine qualities. And I really love this story because you can really see it as this metaphorical feminine insurrection against patriarchal forces. And it deals with things like consent. It deals with things like authority. And you have the women of this story triumphing at every point in turn and defeating these forces of darkness at every turn, which is also what's really cool about this book. This book is associated with a group of texts and a movement, a early Christian movement known as Sethianism. And most Sethian texts place Seth as being the hero. And that's one of the sons of Adam and Eve. And Seth and Seth's descendants are kind of the heroes of the story and the ones who wake up the world, etc. But what's awesome about this book is that it's the daughter of Eve, Norea, who is the hero. And it's Norea's descendants that end up becoming the ones who liberate the world, which is just, I think it's fantastic. Now, is this book perfect? No. There are still some elements that are patriarchal. It's not a perfect book by any means, and I'll point out to you when we come to those parts. But for the time it was written in, it's pretty damn good. It's pretty amazing for, if you especially considering when it was written. So as I told you, this story is just filled with amazing things like the secret daughter of Eve and, the different consensual issues dealing with God and Eve and Norea, the burning down of the ark, Norea defeating God and the forces of darkness. There's a lot. So we have a lot to look at because we're going to read this. Today, we're basically going to be reading the foundation, kind of the backstory that will be leading up to all the events that we're talking about. So this is going to be sort of the backstory. Today, what we're reading, and then we're going to get into the meat of it, or I'm vegan, so the beyond meat of it, and yeah. So I'm really excited about this. I hope you are as well. And let's actually bring it up right now and start diving into it. So, the reality of the rulers, here's the prologue. With regard to the reality of the rulers, the Apostle Paul said of these dark powers that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers of this world and the multitude of demons. The Father of truth inspired the great apostle to write those words. Since you asked about what these rulers really are, I have sent you this letter. So here we're beginning to understand about these rulers or forces of darkness. Now, remember, we can understand Gnosticism as being highly metaphorical. So we're going to see exactly what we're talking about here with the rulers of darkness. And I think an excellent way to interpret it with regard to this story, this particular book, is with regard to the Patriarchy. That's who I see the rulers of darkness being in this particular story. Now, this is an interpretation of it. There are many ways one could interpret this, but I think it's a powerful way to interpret it when you see the themes, the very powerful themes that are explored in this book. So now we go to the topic called the Demiurge and his children. So what is the Demiurge? Demiurge comes from the Greek word demiurgos, which means craftsman or artisan. So we're going to see that the Demiurge, is the creator of the material world. And this is, if you read the Bible today, or understand mainstream Christianity, this is the God of the Bible. But the Gnostics saw this God in a completely different way. So their master, the Demiurge, Yaldabaoth, is blind. So the God of the Bible, the Gnostics look at that, and this is a Gnostic book, if I didn't mention that. I think I did, but they look at the God of the Bible as being a blind God that they call Yaldabaoth, or sometimes Nibro, which means rebel, and sometimes Samael, which means blind God. So they looked at this God as being blind. And remember that Gnosticism is highly metaphorical, highly symbolic. So blindness represents ignorance. So this is a blind God. It doesn't mean literally blind, it means ignorant. Out of conceit and lack of gnosis, right? So gnosis in Greek means knowledge. So this is why he is a blind God. He's conceited and lacking in knowledge. And you see this all the time in the Bible. The God of the Bible is constantly saying, I am a jealous God. You may have no other gods before me. You must worship me only. You must pray to me. You must give sacrifices to me. Clearly extremely conceited and lacking in knowledge. A blind God lacking of gnosis. So out of conceit and lack of gnosis, he declared with his power, I am the only God. There is no other God but me. And this is declared, multiple times in the Bible that God says this. So this being says, I am the only God. There is no other God by me. And by saying this, he sinned against the fullness or the pleroma. So backstory to Gnosticism, if you're not familiar. The fullness or the pleroma is a true realm of divine light. And that is the true reality. That is the ultimate divine reality. The God of the Bible, Yaldabaoth, is actually a god of darkness, according to the Gnostics. And when he declared, I am the only God, there is no other God but me, he sinned. Why? Because he was wrong. Because we are all, as we'll see, we are all divine. We are all denizens of the pleroma. We are all pieces of the divine light, according to Gnosticism. And by Yaldabaoth saying, I am the only God, there is no other God but me, you see his lack of knowledge and his conceitedness, because we are all divine. And this is why it said he sins when he says, I am God. And so there's nothing wrong with saying, I am God. But the sin comes when you say, there is no other God but me. I can say I am God. You can say I am God. Everyone can say I am God, and they should. But when you say there is no other God but me, that's when there is a problem. So, by saying this, he sinned against the fullness, the pleroma. And when his words reached that incorruptible realm, a voice rang out from it that said, you are wrong, Samael, a name that means blind God. This is why they have multiple names for Yaldabaoth, Nebro, the rebel, and Samael, the blind God, because you have this being that is rebelling against the entirety and blind in that out of his ignorance and conceitedness declares, I am the only God and there is no other God but me. So Samael's thoughts too were blind. He expressed his power through blasphemy. So remember, we're talking about sin and blasphemy here, but the Gnostics understand it in a completely different way. You'll notice in mainstream Christianity, what is sin? Well, it's things that you shouldn't do that are considered morally unacceptable, like, stealing or jealousy or envy or gluttony or envying someone's wife or blah, 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 whatever, all these little things that they consider sin. But, don't say bad words, that's a sin, things like that. For Gnostics, sinning is basically stupidity. Sinning is a lack of knowledge, a lack of gnosis. That's what sin is for Gnostics. It doesn't have anything to do with being a good person. It's a lack of knowledge is sin for them. And blasphemy is like going against knowledge and declaring that you are God and no one else is. So for Gnostics, mainstream Christianity would be full of sin and blasphemy. Because in mainstream Christianity, there is no true knowledge. And it's all about worshiping the God of the Bible and no one else being God. So it would be, mainstream Christianity would be the epitome of blasphemy. Now remember, we're going to get to the parts that have to do with the awesome rise of the feminine. But this is just laying the groundwork, because you kind of have to understand how the world got to be this evil place of darkness ruled by darkness before this awesome feminine light and energy can come in and change everything. Okay, so so Samael's thoughts too were blind. Yaldabaoth, the blind God, the God of the Bible, and he expressed his power through blasphemy. Sophia, now here is where we have an introduction of a feminine energy being opposed to this dark, you could call it masculine energy. Now, I also want to say that what is feminine and what is masculine is wholly arbitrary and culturally defined. It's a social construct, okay? So when I say that there's like feminine energy or masculine energy, please understand that I'm being symbolic. I don't believe in that ontologically. But we're talking in story form right now. So I'm using story language, story words, and story symbols to get across an idea. So just remember, none of this is literal. Even me saying feminine energy or masculine energy, this just represents, polarized attributes that have been labeled a certain way according to our culture, according to our traditions, according to our society. So, he expressed his power through blasphemy. Now, Sophia, who is known as wisdom, so this is great. Now we have this feminine character coming on the scene who is Sophia, and she is associated with wisdom. You see how the Gnostics were all, so much had to do with the mind. You have this sort of, masculine figure of darkness that is associated with blindness and ignorance, and this femininity that's associated with wisdom and light. So do you see the battle here? The battle here is between wisdom and light on one hand, and darkness and ignorance on the other hand. Now, also, I want to say, I am not a misandrist. I am not against men by any means. Now, personally, I identify as non-binary, But I'm for equal rights of everyone, including men and women. They should both have equal opportunity. And so I'm not opposed to men. I'm just pro-humanity, pro-people, pro-equal opportunity. And it so happens that we live in an unbalanced world where women don't have equal opportunity or equality to flourish and actualize, and men have kept women in a subservient state. So it's going to sound like that I'm continuously knocking men. I just want to make it clear that I'm not. I am knocking the negative result of a dominating patriarchy, because anything can get out of hand if taken too far. Masculinity taken too far, we have huge problems. But same thing with femininity, taken too far, there will be problems. I am not an advocate for a matriarchy. There should be equal opportunity. We shouldn't look at gender, race, sex, age, none of this stuff when deciding how we want to structure our world. What laws to institute, who should have opportunity. These things should play no role in our judgment of, creating a world where people have equal opportunity to flourish. It shouldn't favor men. It shouldn't favor women. It shouldn't favor a particular race. It shouldn't favor, a particular age group. Like, oh, well, you're too young to really have any say on this. You clearly don't know anything, or you're too old. You don't know what you're talking about. No, none of that. You just look at the ideas, not the these attributes that are inconsequential if the ideas are good. If the ideas are bad, fine, then reject them. But anyway, so it's going to sound like I'm knocking men. I'm not. I'm knocking patriarchy. So we have this battle between wisdom and light versus darkness and ignorance. So wisdom, Sophia, guided him down to chaos and the abyss, his mother, so that his power could be enacted there. So they saw that, Yaldabaoth, the god of the Bible, was getting out of control, saying things like, I am the true God, there's no other God but me. So Sophia, his mother, so already we have a feminine being that is more powerful than the God of the Bible. And Sophia is like, like a naughty child, putting him in timeout by sending him to chaos in the abyss. So basically, all right, fine. If you're going to be an asshole and declare yourself the one true God and the only God, you can't be in the realm of light. You're going to the abyss. So wisdom, Sophia, the mother of God, banishes Yaldabaoth, Samael, the blind god, to chaos in the abyss, so that his power would be relegated to that area alone. And wisdom, or Sophia, established each of his children according to his or her particular traits, based on the model of the eternal realm above. For the visible realm was made after the model of the invisible realm. So, if we look at, hold on, let me just bring something up here, because I want to talk to you about his children that he generates. Because if we look at, let me just bring up another translation that paints, I think, a better picture of this particular aspect. Well, okay, I can't find the particular translation right now, but that's fine. It's not important. Basically, what happens is that Yaldabaoth generates children. And by children, these are the different rulers, the dark forces. And so, in the Bible, this is generally looked at as the angels. You have God and the angels. And in Gnosticism, you have Yaldabaoth, the ruler and his demonic forces, also known as the ruler. He's known as the chief ruler, and they are the rulers in general. So for the visible realm was made after the model of the invisible realm. So basically what happens is that if we look at other Gnostic stories, we get a better picture of this. What happens is Yaldabaoth gets thrown into chaos in the abyss, this world of darkness, and then Yaldabaoth ends up creating Earth, the material world in general. And Earth, the material world in general, is made of the patterns of the true world, the divine pleroma, but it's a really bad copy. It's a malformed copy. So to understand what that means, kind of think of it like this. Let's say you buy some furniture at IKEA and you have the blueprint. The blueprint is perfect. But imagine you want to put that furniture together, but you're really bad at it and you do a terrible job and it comes out looking really shitty because you put everything in the wrong place. That's kind of what's going on here. Yaldabaoth creates and generates in his world of darkness, Earth in darkness, and he models after the perfection of the invisible realm, but it's a very bad copy and it ends up becoming hell. So now we have, one moment. Sorry, I have a million pages open here. There we go. Okay. So incorruptibility. Now this is another character. You know how wisdom is named Sophia, and we have, different characters named after faculties of mind and different attributes. Sorry, I lost my place. Yeah, so incorruptibility gazed down from the fullness into the waters, and her image was reflected in the waters. So now you have another female character. So do you see already that dichotomy? So far, all the heroes of the story so far, Sophia and now incorruptibility, referred to as her, are feminine in nature. Now I want to say again, all of these entities are really androgynous. But you can see where they're obviously exhibiting certain traits associated with certain qualities of a gender expression that we have created today, because they're referring to it as her. So her image was reflected in the waters, and the rulers became infatuated with it. But although they badly wanted to see for themselves the image they had seen in the waters, they were too weak, for their minds could not grasp the ways of truly spiritual beings. For the rulers were from below, but incorruptibility was from above. So when they say water is kind of used as this almost liminal space between the fullness and chaos and the abyss. And this is even talked about in the Bible. They talked about the earth being surrounded sort of by a layer of water. And some people who are involved in Christianity think that, because Noah's Ark, when the world was flooded, they think that, oh, that's where the water came from, because the world was like encapsulated in a sphere of water. And then when the flood happened, God made that water like fall on earth to drown it. Also, I don't know. It's red flag, right? If your God is drowning the entire world, probably not the best God, probably more like an evil, blind, ignorant being, right? So when they're talking about the water, this is metaphorical and representative of a liminal space between the realm of true light and then the chaotic realm of darkness. And so when it says that incorruptibility, her image was reflected in the waters, and the rulers became. They can kind of, in the metaphorical story, look up and see, in that liminal zone, kind of an image of what's in the true realm. They can see a reflection, an image of what's in the true realm, and they see this beautiful incorruptibility. And it's interesting, Wes, is the rulers became infatuated with it, because we're going to see this trend every time we have a female character enter the scene. What the rulers always want to do is trap them, limit them, dominate them, and also they rape them or attempt to rape. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to pick my words carefully because YouTube will be very mad if I say certain things. Non-consensual relations, right? That's what they're trying to do. And again, to me, this is why I think this is a beautiful allegory for the patriarchal system that we live in today, because what happens today in the patriarchal system, there is a limitation of women's power, a fear of women's power, and an attempt to exploit their sexuality. And I think that this is an awesome allegory to learn from in this story. So the rulers became infatuated with this image, and they wanted to seize it for themselves, but they were too weak because their minds could not grasp the way of truly spiritual beings. For the rulers were from below, and the incorruptibility was from above. And why had incorruptibility gazed down into that place? She had done so by the will of the Father in order to unite everything with his light. Now, here's a point I want to mention. Remember, I said that not everything in this is perfect. And here's one of the things. So, you have Yaldabaoth, and you have Sophia, and you have incorruptibility, and then you even have like the Great Mother. Well, the ultimate reality, which for the Gnostics, the ultimate reality is known as like the one, the monad, the fullness, which is just all reality and what is generated from all reality. You can think of it like the source. The Gnostics sometimes refer to this as the Father. And, that's not great. We really shouldn't assign a gender to that if it's like the ultimate realm. Now, granted, again, the Gnostics do say that it's androgynous. They say that. It's not male or female, it's androgynous. But they do so with all the characters. But you can see they still apply gender-specific terms to it, like the father or the mother or he, her, etc. So while this is a great story, it's not perfect. We don't want to call the ultimate reality he or the father, because that implies, even if it's not necessarily so, since they're saying it's androgynous, it implies symbolically a patriarchal system. But anyway, let's continue. So why had incorruptibility? Why did she gaze into the darkness? She had done so by the will of the Father in order to unite everything with his light. So basically, she's gazing into the darkness. And what that means is like letting that element penetrate into darkness in order to transform darkness. You have all these realms in the divine realm, like incorruptibility, wisdom, and what they're trying to do is trying to transform darkness. And so by saying the will of the Father, it means that they want to unite everything. They want everything to be united and whole, not fractured in this sort of light and dark dichotomy. They want to bring everything to fullness. And so that's why she and Sophia are doing all incorruptibility, and Sophia, wisdom, are doing all these things to bring light into darkness. And we're going to see that one of the ways they attempt to bring light into darkness is through the feminine characters of Eve and Sophia, and then Alalith is also going to be very powerful. Oh, by the way, something I really want to mention that's fucking awesome. Remember that Bible verse? And we're gonna read the whole. Okay, sorry. I really like this book. I get excited about it. Women are so marginalized. I get really excited when there's powerful representation, especially in a book that's so old. You know, again, even though it's not perfect, it's pretty damn good for the time it was written in. So, oh yeah, so remember that in the verse that we read coming from the Bible that was very misogynistic, what was it? Here, I'll just look at it again. Oh, it says that one of the reasons why that women should be quiet and submissive and be less than men and all that is because Adam was not the one deceived. It was the woman who was deceived and became a sinner. So their whole argument in mainstream Christianity is that, oh, well, the snake tempted Eve and she was the one that ate from the apple and Adam didn't. So women should be lesser than. Well, guess what? In the reality of the rulers in this book that we're reading, the serpent is actually feminine, and it's a powerful feminine energy from the realm of the true divine light. So the serpent isn't like evil and satanic. The serpent is a feminine energy from the realm of light, and by Eve eating from that tree, she brings wisdom, because it's the tree of knowledge of good and evil. She brings knowledge to the world. So she becomes the hero, and so the serpent and the woman become the heroes. Anyway, it's super cool, but I don't think we're going to reach that part today. We'll probably get to that next week. We'll probably get to that story next week, and it's really good. So, but I'm getting ahead of myself because I just love how antithetical this is to the mainstream narrative of the church today. So, we have, okay, the rulers whose bodies are both male and female. So again, remember, the rulers, all the entities are really described as androgynous, but they clearly display one trait or another, and whose heads are those of beasts, began scheming. So they said, come, let us create a human being out of earthly soil, so that their new creation would be a completely earthly being. They molded the soil into a shape that in some way resembles their own bodies, yet in other ways resembled the image of God that they had glimpsed in the waters. So remember, when they say the image of God, they're not talking about the God of the Bible, because remember, for the Gnostics, the God of the Bible is the evil chief ruler Yaldabaoth, Nibro, Samael, the blind, the rebel. And so when they say the image of God, that they saw the image of God in the waters, they're talking about the divine incorruptibility as she gazed down. That's what they saw. So they said, come, let us seize the image we saw in the waters by the body we've made for it. So they want to seize it and associate it with the body that they've made. But since they were powerless, they did not comprehend the power of God, that image that she reflected in the waters. And their master, so the master now, Yaldabaoth, the God of the Bible, breathed into the body's face, and it came alive. Yet it lay on the ground for several days because they were powerless to give it the ability to stand up. So it became alive, but it's basically paralyzed. It can't do anything. They stood over it, huffing and puffing like storm winds in the hope of catching the image they had seen in the waters. But they did not know the source of the power of that image. All of this happened by the will of the Father of the fullness. So the Spirit saw the human being lying on the ground and came down from the fullness to take up residence within him, so that he became a living soul. And the Spirit named him Adam, because he had been found lying on the ground. A voice from incorruptibility came down to support Adam. So now you have incorruptibility coming down to support and help Adam. The one, when she gazed down upon the waters, now she is coming down to support Adam through this voice. The rulers brought to Adam all of the beasts of the earth and all the birds of the sky, that so he could name each of them. So you know this story from the Bible, where God puts Adam in the Garden of Eden and tells him to name all the animals. Well, this is, the Gnostic version of that, where it's, all right, well, Adam is now in hell, trapped by the rulers, and the rulers are telling him to name the birds and the beasts. So they placed Adam in their garden for him to tend to it, and they gave him an order. Eat from every tree in the garden, except for the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Do not even touch that one, for the day you eat from it will be the day of your death. So again, here we have the rulers wanting to limit Adam and not allow Adam to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, because they don't want Adam to realize what he is. So if we look at another Gnostic book, because this book doesn't really go into detail, but if we look at another Gnostic book known as the Apocalypse of Adam, in the Apocalypse of Adam, Adam and Eve are originally described as a single divine being. They were one, they were united. And what the rulers ended up doing was splitting them and then trapping them in bodies. But that's not described in this one. But just to give it some context here, the reason why that the rulers and Yaldabaoth don't want Adam or any human to realize or have knowledge is because they needed a piece of the divine light, the fullness, in order to animate that body. And so since they are darkness and the light is wisdom and intelligence and knowledge, if that light were to realize what it was, it would realize that it was actually more powerful than the rulers and even God. So the divine light is more powerful than the forces of darkness, the God and the rulers. And that's why they want to keep it trapped in this body and in ignorance, so it doesn't realize that and can remain their slave. And really, that's what we talk about a lot. This is a metaphor, but in Hyperionism, we know that what we truly are eternal monadic minds, and that's why reaching a higher level of consciousness is paramount in Hyperionism, because it entails realizing what we are and realizing that we have power over the world. We can shape this world into whatever we so will. Now, we don't believe in like literally Yaldabaoth and the rulers and all that, but it's metaphor. But anyway, but they did not realize what they'd done, because by the will of the Father, they said this in a manner that made Adam want to eat from the tree, which would enable him to see the rulers differently than a solely fleshly being could see them. So the mistake that they made was that by telling Adam not to eat from the tree of knowledge, it made him want to eat from the tree. Kind of like if you tell your kid, hey, don't eat the cookie. It just makes them want to eat the cookie more. So the next part is called the creation of Eve. And this is where it gets really interesting, because when we get to the section called the creation of Eve, we have a lot of powerful feminine themes coming in, because we are going to see that Adam actually declares to Eve as being his mother, and how Adam was even able to exist, because she reflects the power of the divine light. We're also going to see how once Eve is created, the rulers want to have non-consensual relations with her, and how that plays out. And then we're going to see as well in the Garden of Eve unfolding the power of the feminine manifesting in the serpent and giving knowledge to Adam and Eve through that. So, you know what? I think we're actually going to save that story for next time, because there's a lot I want to talk about, and I don't think I have enough time to talk about that entire part right now. But the main thing that I want to get across is what we read today was really just laying the groundwork, the backstory for what's about to happen. And as you saw, so far, you know, it's not perfect. There's some elements that, you know, aren't great, but I really love this book because we're going to see, you know, incorruptibility, Alalith, Sophia, Norea, all take center stage in this story, battling these forces of darkness, these forces trying to make them submit, these forces that reject them. You have Noah that rejects Norea, and he gets, you know, the ark burned down by Norea's power. You have, you know, the serpent, who is the feminine energy, giving power to bring wisdom to the world. You have ultimately the descendants of Norea, who are, we see down the line, the descendants of Norea are going to be the ones who liberate the entire world and spread knowledge. We have Norea actually defeating the rulers and God himself when they try to have non-consensual relations with her. Anyway, it's really good. I love this book a lot. I hope you do too. And make sure that you are here for next week when we start getting into the story of Eve and the serpent and everything that is entailed with that. I want to give a big shout out to everyone who supports on Patreon. You guys are amazing, especially Cassidy, Alana, Renaissance Fairy, Michael, and Alan. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. If you enjoy my work, if you ever learned something or taken away from something in one of my videos, you know, consider supporting on Patreon. You help me, I help you, we help the world. It's what allows me to create. It's a feedback loop, helps out a lot. You get access to our weekly secret live streams, our hidden Discord server, the Citadel, and a lot of my lecture notes, and a lot more. You get all that on Patreon. It's only $5 a month on a certain tier. And YouTube tier 2 or higher membership gets all that as well. So thank you guys very much. I really appreciate it.